This is Father Patrick Briscoe. Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all who support us. If you enjoy our show, please consider making a monthly donation to us on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Friends, I'm so excited to finally be here today for an episode long in the making. I started talking to these great recording artists, well, not just recording artists, fabulous musicians, and even Christian philosophers. We'll get a little more into that as we go in New York City months ago. But as many of you know, I was reassigned to Rome, Italy, which is where I'm living now. And it took a little bit to set up a studio because anyone who knows anything about Rome knows that it takes a little bit. So we'll just leave it at that. Anyway, so we are finally here together to have what I think will be a very exciting conversation about music and about beauty and evangelization. Jacob and Christa, thank you so much for joining.
Our pleasure.
I think maybe the best place to start is with me mispronouncing your last names. No, I think the best place to start will be just a little introduction, because the two of you are incredible talents. Not just musically, you've accomplished so much already in your careers, which are just beginning. But I wonder if you might give us kind of a personal introduction, and then after each of you tell us a little bit about your background, we'll talk about Higher Word and how you had become friends and partners actually in this incredible project. So maybe Jacob, let's start with you. Where did your love for music come from, and how is that expressing itself in your life?
Well, I mean, the love of music, it's funny. Nobody in my family is really musical. I suppose I have an uncle that's musical, but my parents absolutely not. So it was really, I think, just the Holy Spirit just decided to throw a bunch of music on me from an early age. From all accounts, it was since I was a little baby. I always responded very well to music, but
in the womb.
I guess so. I don't know. I don't know about in the womb.
No, because that would be great. We'll put that in the second reading on your feast day. Like Jacob in the womb.
There you go. Yeah, no, it's funny not to already get distracted, but my wife is also a classical musician, and we just had our first child, and she's a harpist first and foremost, and the harp lays right up against the womb, so we're waiting to see if he has some sort of like really great love for the harp, because it was just right up against him for months. But no, I didn't have any of that in the womb. I'm a composer, so I started by playing the piano. I took piano lessons, and my teacher required me to compose, which of course I hated at first. When I was 8 years old, you hate anything difficult, but I eventually really, it came to dawn on me that was really I think one of my great gifts was composition. And I've gotten all my degrees in composition, and I'm working on my doctorate now in composition at Juilliard. So that's writing music, but of course I also conduct, which is waving the stick, in front of the orchestra. And that's what I do for Higher Word. So piano, composing, and also conducting. It's sort of my musical portfolio.
We'll talk about the overlap between people who lead orchestras and people who drive trains, because I would suppose every now and then maybe you introduce yourself as a conductor and someone asks you, "Oh, how did you get a job at Amtrak?" But maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe they think of the thing you actually do. Okay, well, Christa, let's turn to you, and then I want to hear about your shared project, because that's really the heart of our episode. Christa, what's your musical background? Where did you begin?
I'm very blessed to have this very long foreshadowing of classical music in my story, because my parents were set up on a blind date, and my dad took my mom to see the opera Don Giovanni at the Met Opera when they're on their first date.
That was their first date?
Yes, it's so cool. Because then I grew up, well, even in the womb, my mom would play Mozart for me and everything classical music. Then even when I was still drinking a bottle, they would take me to the Met Opera, and my mom said that some patrons in the opera would turn around to them. They'd hear little bubbles going in the bottle during the opera, but I wouldn't make a sound. I would just love the music. It was super funny. And then, so I grew up
No,
very
that's like an act of war, taking a baby to the opera.
I would not make
That's
it peep. I
very
wouldn't cry.
aggressive.
The air bubbles, right? The obnoxious patrons at the opera is very funny. So then I grew up and I had an attraction to the piano and singing when I was 4 and 5. So my mom got me piano lessons, and my parents provided me so many beautiful opportunities to study piano, viola, and harp lessons all through my childhood, and voice lessons since I was like 7 or 8. And so then as I entered high school, getting closer to college, I was really realizing that no matter how much I was immersed in the academia and difficult academia, AP classes, what was really fulfilling was to be able to share music and share stories through opera and music and vocal performance over the other instruments. And so then I pursued conservatory, went to Manhattan School of Music for vocal performance, and which also led to a love of choral singing. And I learned a lot about choral directing in college as well. And so after my master's degree, I became a Catholic church music director in New Jersey and started learning a lot about the liturgy and connecting all the storytelling to the elevated beauty of the most beautiful liturgical music and sacred music. And then that led me into a lot more choral directing at this point in my career. So a lot of choral directing, gigging on the instruments, directing children's choirs, adult choirs, all ages. And then, so that's basically led me to now I'm still completing a doctorate at Manhattan School of Music in my dissertation phase now.
Christa, what was the first opera you remember going to?
I think I remember either Marriage of Figaro or
As a daughter
Carmen.
of Don Giovanni, apparently.
I think it was actually Carmen, but that one, I think I was 5 years old and I loved the music, but then I was interested in going out into the hallway for the intermission and seeing like what food was out there. So I was like very small. So I loved the music, loved the atmosphere, loved getting dressed up in little fancy dresses with my parents and going out to dinner and stuff. So I loved like the culture and the elevated music even from a young age.
Music was a huge part of growing up, for me, and remains a huge part of my life. I'm an amateur musician in many ways, but I took piano lessons growing up and played clarinet and saxophone and a host of other things. Not anything very well, but dabbled in lots of things. I love listening to music. I've always got something on, and my mom always did. She was always playing the radio at home, and so music was just very much the sound of it's what home sounds like for me. But I remember going to my first opera very well because it was in college. And it was during a phase where I thought like, well, I'm not so serious about pursuing my vocation. I had just left diocesan seminary, and it was before I entered the Dominicans. And I really got into Wagner, which is like not a good thing for a young man to really do, because it's just how excessive. But the first opera I ever went to see was Tristan and Isolde at the Chicago Theater. And it just melted my face off. I mean, it was so astonishingly beautiful. And there are all kinds of reasons why I think Wagner is indulgent, and why that opera was a really bad thing for me actually that moment. But it was very beautiful. It was very beautiful. And the form of opera, I think, is something that will be surprising for a lot of modern people to encounter. And I've heard this from brothers who moved to New York, right? And they get invited to an opera. They go to an opera for the first time, and opera is just so different from the way we live our day-to-day lives. Where you now are viewing things on on your little iPhone, right? I remember there was a lot of talk when The Irishman came out. People screaming, the director screaming, "Don't watch it on your phone. Go and see this on a big screen." And there's something about the arts that demand that. So I want to hear from you, Christa, and Jacob too. Jump in here about what it is that you think opera does, why it affords this kind of escape, and classical music too, for that matter. Any kind of real robust symphonic music, but even to some extent any live music.
Mm-hmm. I think that part of, sorry, do you mind if I answer it first, Jacob? I don't know if you want to.
Go ahead, totally.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think that music that most touches the heart and touches people viscerally when they're not expecting it happens when there's a certain visceral truth that's contained in the artwork that reflects God. So even though you may not think of opera before liturgical music as being something of God, but anything that has an innate sense of truth, because God is the ultimate pinnacle of truth. So I think that in a lot of senses, like Oscar Wilde says, art imitates life, life imitates art, that sort of thing. You can see a lot of real life and emotion and human condition and human weakness and frailty, especially in tragedies and comedies of opera. And so that's what really drew me to this type of storytelling. It is bigger than life for sure, very bombastic at times, very dramatic, very comedic. But even taking the story of Don Giovanni, with the moral in that, Don Giovanni getting dragged down to hell at the end because of the unwillingness to submit to the morality of what the commendatore is calling him to. I mean, there's so much truth even in that story, and it seems like Mozart was maybe just attacking the bourgeoisie in a lot of his operas. But there's so much truth in that, if you can find the moral truth and what happens to these characters. So I think that's why it touches a lot of people viscerally.
Yeah, I would just add, just sort of in a broader perspective, I guess, why does music intensify a story, I guess, right? Why? I mean, and we can think about this liturgically, of course, too. And this is sort of kind of what we're exploring right now at Higher Word, but Christa's dissertation, and it's very much something that occupies a lot of my thought too. Is the higher mass is sung, right? Low mass, higher mass. I mean, speaking of the centuries gone by, why is music an intensification of something? And it's a really ancient mystical thing. But when you sing, obviously we have the good quote from St. Augustine that he who sings prays twice. But there's something very tangible emotionally, taking a story and singing it, or even taking the gospel and singing it. And like I said, very, very mysterious, but I think it just plays on our emotions all the much more, and it can be used for good or evil. Music can make you do crazy things, and the ancient Greeks were always talking about, well, don't play in that mode because that mode is going to make you angry, and don't play in this mode because that'll make you fall in love. But if you're too angry, play this mode and it'll calm you down. So it's really a fascinating thing.
So in one of my Italian classes this fall, there was a masseuse from Thailand, Thai masseuse, who's, hanging out here in Italy now, and she's learning Italian and moved her whole life here. Anyway, so we're talking about her spa one day, and we're, just asking, like, what are the key elements? And as she's describing it, one of the things she starts talking about is the music. And so there's something, I think, deeply in us, because we're the kind of rational animal that we are, right? Not just a body, not just a soul, but a body-soul composite. Hashtag Aristotle. There's something deeply in us, because we're this rational animal that makes us respond to music in a very fundamental way, and we recognize this in all sorts of areas in our life, right? So even the Thai the Thai massage spa, the Thai spa can identify this, but there's something about music. That's why my mother always had music on in the home, I think, to calm us down a little bit. It can have the opposite effect too. Again, you listen to too much Wagner and your passions just end up way out of whack. You end up a complete degenerate. But it's what all the kids are doing these days. They're just all listening to too much Wagner. That's the problem with our society.
That's the issue.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great if we were just too degenerate and indulgent because all of our young people loved Wagner too much? That would really be something. I yearn for that. But this has brought these fundamental ideas about music, especially looking for something higher. Christa, your extraordinary thoughts just then about truth and beauty as an exploration of reality. That's brought you together in this project, which we've called Higher Word. I haven't introduced it yet, but maybe Jacob, you could lead us through the vision of Higher Word and a little bit about how you and Christa come to work together in Higher Word.
Certainly, yeah. So I guess it goes back to Spencer McIntosh and Nick Sam, who aren't here, but they're sort of the from what I understand. I mean, Christa actually may be able to fill in some of the details because she's been around with the organization longer than I have. But but from how I understand it, it sort of began as just
Right, a 50% chance of getting it right, whether to ask you or Christa about she'll set us straight, don't worry.
A group of people that got together to talk about theological things, aesthetic questions, theology. Father Graby was sort of the original priest that was the core. And basically, bit by bit, they said, well, let's elevate this a little bit. Let's have some food. Let's have a little, like a soloist, a single instrument. Maybe let's have a quartet now. Maybe, and they gradually were expanding and doing little things. And I moved to the city to do my master's at Juilliard in 2021. And I'm a convert, so I actually became Catholic in 2023. And in 2024, I guess it was, now I'm getting things screwed up, 2024, yes, it must have been, in April, I went to a men's breakfast and was introduced to Spencer. Cardinal Burke was the speaker, and a mutual friend of ours just said, hey, there's this guy here that wants to start a Catholic orchestra. You should go talk to him. And I just thought that was amazing. And essentially, Nick and Spencer sat down with me and had coffee, and they said, hey, do you know anybody that can conduct? And I said, well, I can conduct. I'm not my degrees aren't in conducting, but I can. And they basically hired me on the spot. They threw me this orchestra, and they said, okay, we want to do a full orchestra concert in October. You have, 5 months, basically. Let's see what happens. And that was our first concert. That was Source of Beauty. And we were shocked. I mean, we had over 400 people in attendance, St. Anthony of Padua downtown. And I mean, it was just, and by 1 year later, after that first meeting with Spencer and Nick, we had our Easter concert in Old St. Patrick's, filmed by EWTN, with over 500 people in attendance. And I mean, it's just shocking how it took off. So that's sort of my involvement. I mean, Chris and I both are the music directors here. So we sort of handle a lot of programming and conducting, and Christa also is conducting at almost every concert too. And it's sort of just this great experience. This organization is just taking off, and we're just sort of along for the ride.
Have baton, will travel.
Yes.
Christa, what did we miss? What else do we need to know about Higher Word and its origins?
I had just a teeny bit earlier involvement, but basically I was helping to grow the initial groups that were meeting at the small venues with the quartet and the soloist. Right after they did a couple of those events with the small music groups, a mutual friend in the city connected us who was in the Catholic community, because I've been pretty involved in New York City's Catholic community since like 2012 when I started going to school there. And so I just got to know a lot of people who were also musicians, whether like it was like a secondary instrument of theirs or they're professional musicians. So when I was first presented with the idea of growing this kind of group to have always a musical element to Father Graby's talks or another priest talk, to have the higher word element of like feeding the intellect, and then you would feed like the heart and the soul with the music. That was the original like impetus for wanting there to be music at these priest talks. And so I brought a little bit of my network in here, and we had a first concert 2 Easters ago with a chamber orchestra. So we had a small group, and we also had a mixture of genres of music, a little bit of different things. Like we had a film score piece, we had from Gladiator, we had like a classical piece, we had a hymn, a lot of different interesting programming there. And then shortly after that was when Jacob was connected with Spencer as well. So we combined our networks, which is really cool because we intend it to be an underlying moral foundation of like this Catholic group. But also one of the coolest things that Jacob brought to the group was his network of a lot of other professional, top-notch Christian musicians as well. So I think that's a really cool aspect of the group that we're turning very naturally into with the Holy Spirit and evangelization apostolate as well, that we have these top level musicians and an entire roster of full choir, full orchestra, Christian and Catholic musicians to whom the faith in general and the connection with Christ is all meaningful to every single person in the group. So that's like the biggest impetus for us, for it to be an evangelization apostolate. And Jacob would talk more about his friend Pearl, who is going to be entering the Catholic Church, our first like technical orchestra convert in the group. Do you want to talk about Pearl?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
excuse me. Yeah, no, I just figured all musicians were probably on their Don Giovanni path, but like this is great,
A lot of them, but
yeah, no, a friend of ours from Juilliard as well. So like Christa was saying, we are top to bottom as sort of Catholic in mission, in structure. All of the people that run it are Catholic, and we wanted to maintain a very strong Catholic identity. So we always play in Catholic churches. We always have a Catholic priest that speaks. And I mean, part of an additional thing that sort of made this unique. Oftentimes we program only Catholic composers on the concerts, and I give little like 5-minute kind of blurbs in between each piece, maybe 10 minutes of music and 5 minutes of talking about the composer's life, the background of the piece, but specifically the composer's spiritual life. So talking about the Catholic influence on Mozart and Beethoven. Beethoven was a deathbed revert to the Catholic faith. Mozart was a practicing Catholic pretty much his whole life. I mean, he probably got a little loose somewhere.
With varying success.
20s, but,
yeah.
But and obviously there were.
We'll take it.
Before 1520, everybody was Catholic, in Western Europe. So just kind of tracing that, because for a lot of classical musicians, they hear about these things in conservatory that, oh yeah, okay, classical music began with Notre Dame in 1100, basically, and they have to study chant, but nobody actually thinks the great composers really believed the Catholic faith. If I tell people that Mozart had an argument supposedly with somebody about the real presence in the Eucharist and how he was so upset that this other musician didn't believe in the real presence. Even Beethoven was writing Eucharistic hymns, and was like fascinated with Catholic theology. This blows people away. And so I had a lot of friends from Juilliard that are Protestants, but very, very much devout Christians, and wanted to take part of it. And we all sort of decided, hey, we're not going to exclude people, not because they're not Catholic. We're going to bring them into this Catholic experience. And a lot of times, this is the first time some of these musicians had been in a Catholic church, we start every rehearsal with a prayer, acknowledging the tabernacle. And it's sort of a crazy experience for these people to think, wow, people actually believe this, and it's behind the music that we're learning about playing. So.
Right. I was 37 years old, which is to say it was this year, before I heard Mozart's Requiem played in the course of a liturgy. Because you always hear it, of course, in a concert hall. And even in a concert, a concert in the church is a noble thing. I'm totally behind your project. I love a higher word and everything you guys are doing. Then I want to hear a little bit more about Pearl. We're going to get back to that. But the fact that, I've been a lifelong Catholic and a Sunday mass goer my whole life. And I hadn't tapped into this great patrimony. I mean, for me, it was like discovering, discovering the bottom of the well, right? Like, this is where it all comes from. You get to see something that you haven't seen before, or pray in a way that you haven't prayed before. And I was a priest, attending this mass and just appreciating every aspect of it. And so I wonder, in the conversations you've had with your friend, with your fellow musician, what aspect of what exactly is that aspect of truth that first opened in her heart, right? Like, people always ask, like, how do we do this for more people? So what is it that she was curious about initially?
Well, I mean, initially, my wife was still a student at Juilliard at the time, Amanda, and she was hosting a Bible study, and Pearl went to the Bible study and found out Amanda was Catholic and left. Because from her upbringing, Catholics
Whore of Babylon,
saved,
can't trust that business.
And there was all these evil things with Catholics, and so it really began on the personal level.
The Antichrist just lives across the river over here.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. No, it's crazy how
I can see his house from here. It's right.
Yeah, no, I've heard that before. But no, it's we got to know Pearl, and she's one of 12 children, one of 11 children, homeschooled. So she had this very deep, sort of
this is a serious Christian, yeah.
Yes, background, and she'd never had her questions answered before. So once you get past it, we don't worship Mary, the Pope isn't God, that kind of stuff. that softened her heart a great deal, and she started reading a lot of books. But then at the same time, she was brought into higher word and was just brought into contact with a lot of other Catholics that really, lived their faith, were also musicians. So you get people that are doing the same career as you. And it really, I think, just comes down to so many conversations, and of course the grace of just being in a Catholic church. We can't overlook that, being in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, that moves hearts in mysterious ways. And I think the other thing she would have me tell you is the nuns. When we would have Sisters of Life come to our concert, she was blown out. She would just lost it when she saw like a group of 30 nuns, and she's like, "Can I please go up and talk to them?" And it's like, "Yeah, go ahead." So she loves the Sisters of Life. So
no, only the enemies of God could hate the Sisters of Life. That much is true. Christa, one of the things that I hear Jacob pointing out, and one of the things that a higher word has begun to do, is to build a community. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of musicians are looking for. A lot of musicians have beautiful experiences of that, because you join an ensemble and suddenly you're with these people and you're with them a lot. You get very comfortable very quickly, right? There's that tendency in among performers, right? Because you're just sharing so much of life so intimately, especially when you're preparing something. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit, say a few words about what your experience in higher word has been in building that kind of community, and again, not just for the musician participants, but for hearers.
Yeah, even with a personal note of being a musician who networks a lot, plays a lot of different gigs in New York, New Jersey, tri-state area, I think some of the most satisfying and fulfilling gigs in general, even if they're secular or sacred gigs, is that I'm able to connect with really high-level musicians, and then the music is really satisfying to produce and to share because it's very high level. But then when I got connected with this group, the next level up even from that makes me desire to be part of the community is that we're sharing good friendships. We're connecting over a meal at the rehearsal. We're doing this fellowship building that's having me naturally get to know the people as well. So when you're working with really good people who are very down to earth, nobody ever argues about the music, even if we have suggestions, everybody's very polite to each other. It's just a very generally positive environment. And then on top of that, besides being a good to work with, then you have respect for each other because you're all really good musicians. So having like a top echelon group of musicians come together and not just be there for the gig. I do a lot of one-off gigs too that are very fun and whatever. But if that is the end of the gig, if I go for one gig, then it ends there. It's like, oh, I look back at fond memory, whatever, kind of forget about it. But if you're a recurring group that comes together for a few rehearsals and then a good high-level concert that people are generally enjoying and connecting to and being really touched by unexpectedly, it's like, whoa, it's like the fellowship, then it's the quality, then it's like the touching the hearts, and then you can feel really satisfied that you're contributing something meaningful. You're contributing something that helps other people connect to aspects of God. You don't even have to be Catholic to go to our concerts and enjoy it, which is like the most satisfying thing ever, because I love the Catholic communities. I'm in a lot of different Catholic communities, but when you have tons of people coming to the concert that aren't even Catholic and saying that, this should be in like Avery Fisher Hall and whatever, like you guys should be like whatever. And so that's really it's satisfying and fulfilling to be able to share in something really like much greater than myself.
Yeah, Christa, I think I shared this with you when we first met, but I have a friend named Joe Peters who lives in Chicago, but he's from Northern Indiana originally, where we both grew up together. And he leads annually a Messiah Festival chorus and ensemble. And it's a great production and it gets better every year. But what he's managed to do is create just a cultural powerhouse, in a very non-Catholic place, Northeast Indiana. And the music is of course top-notch. My friend's very talented, very attentive, and he's a great leader. So one of the ways that this group was thinking, there's a lot of Catholics in the ensemble. They were thinking, how can we participate in the Eucharistic revival? They hosted a concert dedicated to hymns and works of music about the Eucharist for inquirers, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, have come to the Catholic Church because of that concert, because they were just so moved by the whole thing. Whereas they otherwise wouldn't have been open maybe to stepping into a church, or who knows how their journey could have been. So music has a capacity to reach people different ways. We all know that. It has a possibility to build communities. It connects us with the truth, as you were saying, Christa. But I think also it expands our horizons and allows us to get into places, to connect with people that we wouldn't have necessarily before. And that's one thing that I've always appreciated about music, because when you join an ensemble, you're just there to play your part, but like, here comes everybody else. And when you're in an orchestra, you're doing just your part. You can't control the whole thing, not even the conductor, because what if the snare drummer isn't looking at you? It's got to be very frustrating. But they always look, I'm sure. You never have that problem, Jacob. But there's a way the analogy is very important, because that's Christian life, where we're all in it together. We can't control it. We only know our part. We can only see our perspective, but we're all making a genuine contribution, and it can be beautiful if we take the time to share it. So tell us a little bit more about the future of Higher Word, what your goals are, ways that you're looking to grow or to continue.
Well, it's actually very serendipitous that you mentioned Mozart's Requiem, because our next event is a liturgical performance of Mozart's Requiem.
No way. Okay, well, yes. No wonder Christa was all smiley about it. I just thought, oh, that's Christa. She's always happy. But
yeah, no, it's that is actually really what we're gearing up for right now. It's February 26th, Thursday night at the Church of the Blessed Sacrament in New York, 71st and Broadway, 6:30 p.m. I think. Although this I guess it might have already happened by the time this goes up. But anyways, it's still worth talking about. The concert actually was spurred by a new Catholic foundation in New York that's in memory of a man named Alex Klusic. It's run by his brother, John Paul Klusic. And Alex Klusic was killed in a car crash, a very, very devout Catholic. And so his brother is trying to honor his memory. And he started this foundation in his brother's memory that provides housing for young Catholic professionals in New York. And to kind of get it going, he wanted sort of a marquee event that would bring people together. And instead of just having sort of a cocktail hour or whatever, he wanted something very, very solemn and
this is different. That's awesome.
And so he wanted
New York is full of meet and greets. New York is not full of Mozart's Requiem.
Right. So that's our next event. That's what we'll be doing. I mean, we typically do about 3 orchestra concerts a year. So we do one in the fall, usually one around Easter, and then something around Christmas time or Epiphany. We also have this consecration to Saint Joseph that Christa can talk about.
Is Father Jonah Teller going to preach this mass?
Yes.
Oh, well then, okay, I'd go. I'd love listening to that guy. He's pretty bright.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. He's great. The St. Joe's or Greenwich Village, New York community is actually stellar. I mean, I'm sure you heard from Father Jonah. They have over 100 people in their OCAA program right now. It's amazing. So there's a huge Catholic community.
Yeah, he actually just texted me pictures of the masses through December, the screenshots from the security camera. Like the second Sunday of Advent. Who cares about that? But just totally packed church, people standing outside. Packed vestibule, people standing outside.
Yep, totally packed. Incredible, exactly. So you want to enrich like a really good community like that with good music and good liturgy. So we're doing this very special consecration of St. Joseph Mass on March 19th, and it'll be with music with string quartet and then vocal octet. And we'll do a lot of like chant and polyphony and beautifying the liturgy to the best of our ability. It's such a gift to be involved in that, to be praying for this consecration to St. Joseph.
Now, before we hit the big red button and started recording, we're talking about background, and Jacob said that he's studying composition. And I teased him saying, well, hasn't everything good been written already? And part of that comes out of what I think is a genuine sense that most people have. You go to a concert and you're looking at the program, and everything looks great except for that one new dumb thing. That's just terrible. And that's when, you could go out and go to the bathroom, I guess, or extend your intermission. No, but and Christa, you kind of prompted this. You wanted to have you've proposed some questions about beauty. But Jacob, one thing that I really wanted to ask you is, why is so much contemporary composition so bad? I know these people are smart. They know way more about music than I do. But it's horrible to listen to.
Yeah. there's so much to be said, but the core of it is just a loss of beauty, and sometimes a outright hostility towards beauty. I remember having dinner with a colleague of mine who was also getting his master's in composition, and he flat out told me he didn't believe in beauty as a composer. And a very very reasonable young man otherwise, and it floored me. I was just dumbfounded, not even in any subjective way, just beauty just doesn't exist. And I think that is something that really actually sadly,
okay, so you could just drink protein shakes all the time and have a nice life.
But
I
really,
like at the basis of your senses.
it's crazy. It's crazy. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And yet I think there's a couple things going on where, on the one hand, people have lost their training to a certain extent in a traditional way. So very, very few composition programs teach traditional composition. And that's a goal of my life someday, is to start a place where you can still learn that. And not to get into the technical things, of course, but basically the technique that causes a painter to paint something that actually looks real, is equivalent in music. The ability to write polyphony, for example, fancy word for different lines that sound in harmony together. That's something that was taught throughout history. Counterpoint is another word for that. That's being removed from curricula all across the country and the world. It's no longer relevant, because now it's not about craft or beauty. It's about your own personal expression and just doing whatever the heck you want. And that's why you can take a can of paint and throw it on a canvas and say, this is a painting, give me $20,000. The same thing is happening in classical music. So there's a loss of craft. There's a lack of skill. And I think there's a lack of belief in beauty. And as far as everything being done, because that's something I've heard before of, why do you even try? It's already been done before. I just don't believe that, because we're each of us a new creation. I actually was told that once in a lesson by the guy who ended up he's now the dean of the music school at Juilliard. But he said, don't trouble yourself about what's been done and what hasn't been done. You are unique. You are new. You are a unique individual, and whatever you do hasn't been done before because you haven't existed before. So if people just, I think, believe that and actually got really deep training. I was fortunate enough to go off to Paris and study for a month at one of the few programs that does teach a really traditional classical composition curriculum, which changed my life.
I can't believe that exists in France, but okay.
Yeah, well, it's that's a whole other story, but it's the
those deconstructionists take over everything.
There's a group keeping a flame alive from probably the greatest classical music teacher, was a very devout Catholic. Nadia Boulanger was her name, and she died in the 70s, and her students are keeping up her tradition there. But anyways, we're in crisis culturally. I think everybody can see that everywhere. But as with all good things, people want to deform them. I mean, pick whatever you want. Sexuality, and honestly, is a great example of that. Of a very pure and beautiful, good thing that is so distorted and so deformed in so many myriad ways that people don't even think about it anymore. And I think that applies to art as well. It was once completely understood as beautiful, true, good, directly from God. Now it's all about you. Whatever makes you feel good, say whatever you want, do whatever you want. It's art because art's about you and it's not about God.
Christa, what are some of the pieces that you think are key philosophical ideas that we need as we start to rebuild, as we start to recover? Not just recover. That's what I think is so important. That's what I loved what you were saying, Jacob. Because it's not just about doing the same old things. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that from a liturgical perspective, right? They say, oh, you just want to do old things because they're old. No, it's about us doing them, or about us entering into something that's noble. The way we put it on the podcast, or the way that I like to say it is, sin is boring, because sin is the repetition of the same things. But the saints are creative. Look at them; their lives are so different. They don't read like the lives of criminals, which are just always the same things. The lives of the saints are much more exhilarating. They're much more exciting. And so I agree that there's much more here on the horizon. But what do we need to know? Back to my question to you, Christa. What do we need to know to begin our way forward?
Just I love everything that Jacob just said. So maybe just continuing a little bit of his last thought there with like, I think the part of the crisis of the culture is a pervasive looking inward constantly, and like a constant self-focus on just totally closing off the rest of the world or other possibilities of hearing other people's opinions even. And so the more inward you're focused, the more you're closed off to God and closed off to truth, beauty, and goodness. So if you understand at least one of the basic ideals of Christianity is like very outward, what can I do to serve you? What can I do to connect with you? What can I do to connect with God? If you have some of those basic goals of ordering the good, okay, so if you talk about even like sexuality and things in life that are good things that need a balance, because part of our purpose in life is to try to order our passions. So we take all these good things. I mean, it's even involved in opera too. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of negative things about opera and music too, that if you go too far in one direction, not virtuous, too far in the other direction, not virtuous. But having that balance and you're ordering your perception of truth in the world through ordering those passions, then it's going to be right in line with what St. Thomas Aquinas says about your perception of beauty, of things that are truly beautiful, bringing pleasure to you. So if your passions are not ordered and you're just receiving pleasure from things that are not virtuous, then your perception of beauty is also going to be a little bit skewed. So I think that's also part of the fundamental issue here. And then if you have that step, I don't know if you want to cut in. I don't want to just that I'm talking to it, but
I'm agreeing with you. The only thing I want to ask is just to push you a little bit further and to ask you, well, isn't beauty just in the eye of the beholder?
Part of my life has been trying to
see if I can see your head actually explode on the screen. Like maybe a little fire would shoot out.
That's what it felt like just now. Okay, so because it's so frustrating to me because it's hard. It's really that's why. Okay, Catholic and Christian philosophers.
No, it's just there's no accounting for taste, Christa. It's just
like, oh my gosh, since like Aristotle, people have been trying to define beauty and talk about it to begin to define it, and even St. Thomas Aquinas doesn't completely define it because it's almost impossible to completely define because it involves a human person as well, and so because we're all unique, like Jacob was saying, it's hard to completely define it. But if you start in a place that like Plato and Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas have started to define it, he says some of the essential elements are a sense of integrity, integritas, consonantia, which is proportion, and claritas, which is a sense of radiance or transcendence to the material. So if you start from that, one of those bases, and then you have a moral foundation, if you're formed well, that you can perceive the truth in general objectively. You can agree that there is a thing that actually is objective truth, which is not even agreed upon in culture right now anyway. So if you agree if there's objective truth and you have your passions ordered towards goodness, then you can recognize these elements of the integrity, clarity, and radiance in music and in things in life, artwork and music specifically. So I think that's like a place to start, at least with perceiving beauty.
And if I can just add one little thing on top of it, now you're never going to get us to shut up now, Father, because this is
let's go. This is the meat. This is what people have been waiting for. They've been like, okay, Father Patrick, stop talking. Let these experts talk.
Yeah, but truly, I think there's something. Just my own life story here, just for a second. I grew up in the Lutheran Church, which is often called the singing church. Right? Luther was a composer himself.
Were you ECLA or were you Missouri Synod, Wisconsin?
I was, the ELCA. Yes.
ELCA. There we go.
Yes, there's a lot of different synods, but I didn't grow up actually hearing Bach in church, ironically enough. But in any case, there's this big emphasis on hymnody and all this, what have you. But one of the things that drew me towards the Catholic Church was reading the Catechism and the richness and the cohesion and the total synthesis of 2 millennia of thought. Just boom, right together. You can read,
We got a lot of celibate nerds sitting around thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, but to see it's great. A lot of good can be done. That has been done, but it bowled me over because it lit up a whole understanding that I only saw a sliver of truth about. And just 2 examples. One, Saint Boethius, or Severinus, I guess they would say, Severinus, however you say it correctly. But Boethius is what we know him as in the musical world. He wrote Consolation of Philosophy, but he also wrote a huge treatise on music. And the opening paragraph, not even the first line, he says the creation of the world was an act of musical concord, musical harmony. Saint Hildegard.
That's where Lewis gets his idea for Narnia.
Yes.
About,
really? Okay. Well, there you
about
go.
Aslan singing Narnia into being.
Well, okay. So that was the other thing I was going to say. I'm just still in like the zealous convert phase right now, where I'm like a kid in a candy store, just like what, you know?
Who was a martyr? You know that, right? Boethius was not just a genius; he was a martyr.
Yes.
Killed by the Arians.
And he's buried next to Augustine, I think, or he was at least.
Just underneath him. It's very beautiful. It's in Pavia. I just got to go. Beautiful tombs. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, we were taught this in our doctoral studies. We had to read Boethius, and everybody's like, well, he wasn't actually a saint. He wasn't actually a Christian. It's like, no, I mean, the same professor said, well, Hildegard never would have been Catholic unless she was forced to, you know, she was.
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
no, look, I mean, it's worth dying over whether or not the word was begotten, you know, or created. In fact, we're going to talk about Arianism. Yeah. Right.
But Hildegard, again, the composer, great mystic, of course, but she talks about Adam having the voice of the angels, of him actually being able to sing celestial music. And I think I haven't spent enough time thinking about this, but when he fell, he was given human voice, and he couldn't. If we heard his voice, we wouldn't be able to bear it. I think she said she had a vision of that. So we actually have, just so much as we have that part of us, it gives us. St. John Paul II says something, I think in the letter for artists, that it's nostalgia for heaven, that there is a part of us that was created to be with God, and that part of us is musical. And that's why music resonates with us, because it reminds us of heaven. It reminds us of God. You know, the angels are musical in some very wild, weird, celestial way. We don't know what that is, but we know they're always, you know, whatever we can understand in our human limited understanding, lyres and harps and whatever, they talk about that. But the angels, they do something.
They're going to be blowing trumpets.
Right. Well, something, right? So it all gets into this great mystery that if people don't even let themselves believe it, and it's true. It's true as any other part of the faith, but that music is encoded into us, and it does something to us that we really can't understand, I think, until, God willing, we reach heaven.
Yeah, it's always a reflection of heaven. Also thinking about people who aren't even privy to these philosophical ideas or musical ideas or history. If they encounter something that's truly beautiful, they're going to say, what is this? What is this thing? It's something that's touching me. I'm feeling something. Like I'm feeling emotion. I'm feeling something inside that I don't know how to describe. So I think that anybody, no matter what culture you're from, if you're in the middle of like the jungles of Africa, if you're from anywhere and you encounter something truly beautiful that has that transcendence, then you're gonna go through some sort of crazy experience and you're like, wait, what is happening to me? You know, oftentimes some of the most beautiful music, or even encountering the Eucharist and in beautiful music, has caused me to have this feeling of like, oh, what's happening to me? Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, you know?
Christa, drawing on your Italian patrimony here, do you know, questions about the old country, do you know what the number one industry in Italy is?
I would say like pasta production, but probably not the answer.
Agriculture, you know, and other food products are up there. No, the number one industry is tourism. Everybody comes here. Beauty. Why do they come here? Right. Because it's so beautiful.
Yes.
It's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful place I've ever lived. It's just absolutely astonishing. And well, a friend just remarked this at dinner the other night, and I think he's right. He's French, you know, so he's full of the French thoughts. So we're sitting there at dinner. He doesn't have a very strong accent, but anyway, so he's commenting on the way that the Italian young people live among the ruins of Rome. And it was he got onto something that I thought was so marvelous, because he said they don't look at it like it's a past culture. It's not as if they're longing for. They don't want to be members of the Roman Legion, you know. They don't want the empire back. but they all possess it as if it were present. So there's a way that Italians live close to history that is very different from the way we do as Americans. Part of it's because they have so much of it, but I think part of it is because it's just objectively so powerful and it surrounds them. And there's just a kind of harmony or a fullness of expression there. And I think that's the kind of thought that really expresses what a nostalgia for heaven is. It's not just that it was something lost, although I think that's very important. The fall is very real, but it's kind of natural. We want it. It draws us out of ourselves because we're for it. We were made for it. Just like every Giovanni and Giovanna, was supposed to sit and make out at the base of the Colosseum or whatever they do. They just, this is just what Italian young people do. They're for it. This is their place, and it's part of them. And it couldn't be otherwise. And everyone who comes here can see that. That's why people travel here. I mean, it's not just that it's so beautiful, but it's possessed. There's a people and a nation and a story here that's extraordinary, that's honed. And I think that's what we're being invited into, in a particular way in sacred music. Okay, so that's what I wanted my last thought to be, to take us a little bit to. Now, we don't have to name why whatever hymns are the worst liturgical hymns.
I can talk to you another hour about that.
don't want to be nasty there. But I do want to say, just to ask in a more of a positive thing, what do you think are some of the ways forward? What do you think are some of the ways in which beautiful liturgical music can revive and can restore and renew our church?
Well, I'm sorry, no, Jacob.
No, I was just thinking, I mean, if you got something, go ahead, Christa. It's a great question.
Yes,
it's hard. I get that. A lot of the patrimony of sacred music can seem overwhelming to people, but I don't think it's that hard, actually.
No, it's not. It's not that hard to see what the trends of people are attracted to who are, converting and coming to the church. Especially, I think that's a good sign of what people are attracted to in large numbers. I think that I've been involved in sacred music since I was a very little girl, singing in choirs and amongst every different genre of sacred music that's sometimes not even sacred music that they're putting in mass, but whole nother topic. But for what people are attracted to, being able, things that are accessible.
I love Andrew Lloyd Webber's Pia Jesu, okay? Don't come at me. It's a beautiful piece of music.
Yes, but it even says in the church documents you can't have theatrical music in mass. Anyways, it's interesting to observe, also people's misunderstanding of what is the most appropriate and elevated and called for that's prescribed by Mother Church too. So you have, I guess, number one thing to understand is if you have a complete respect for the authority of the church and the love for the tradition that Christ set up and the trust in the church, if that's the basis, everything else will come easier. I mean, in everything, like evangelization and everything else too. But if you're talking about music, you read some church documents, even things that have come out of Vatican II, people are skeptical of, but Sacrosanctum Concilium. I mean, the Germ, if you read the general instructions of the Roman Missal for how, if nobody reads these things, if you read the basic rubrics, it's saying that Latin has pride of place in the church, Gregorian chant should always be involved in some capacity because that is what can unite all of us.
The organ, that's my favorite line.
Organ is the instrument of the church. Also, it's fascinating. People usually don't think about the organ in this context of the production of the sound of the organ emulates the human voice. Well, primarily the human voice is the primary instrument supposed to be used for Mass because of the text that we communicate the Mass through the text of the singing. And then the organ has air coming through the pipes, just like we have air coming through our vocal cords. So it emulates the human voice, which is why it's the most primary, most appropriate instrument used in the liturgy. And then on top of that, people don't realize the richness of singing the propers during Mass, these words that are specific to every single Mass of every single day in the liturgical cycle, and then you're singing those texts, and then providing music that is supposed to be creating an atmosphere for prayer, drawing you out of yourself. Again, not about me. It's not about a performance in Mass, but it's about something drawing your attention to the altar and what's happening in the Mass. So it's creating an atmosphere that can help clear your mind of any of that, almost like purging your mind of any other thoughts that are distracting, and then providing your focus to the altar as well, what's going on in the Mass. So those are some of these basic elements. And the most accessible way for people to access that often is through music that is not like the secular world. So this is like the primary thing with liturgical music that I'll die in this hill is because if you're if you're entering a church and you're hearing pop music that sounds like the radio, or instruments that sound like music on the radio, sometimes like guitar. So I won't go into that tangent. It's a little offensive to some people, but it's certain things that are related to the world. It's not drawing you out of the world into the thing that's the closest thing you can get to heaven before going to heaven. I don't know if it's Padre Pio quote or somebody said, if people really knew what the Eucharist was and what's happening at Mass, there'd be armed guards, tons of armed guards outside of every church, if you understand.
Oh, you could just make it up and attribute it to Padre Pio. It's totally
right?
Cool. Everyone here does it all the time. Padre Pio, huh? I think one of the many things you said there that I think is very important, that I always recommend as a great beginning place is to start with the propers, to start with the texts of the Mass. Mm-hmm. I had an excellent Catholic formation, was very involved in all kinds of liturgical musical ensembles, but didn't understand what the propers were, how they worked, until I was in college seminary. And it wasn't until that real abundance of liturgical formation began. But you can offer that to people much sooner. That's not complicated, and that's an easy way to reclaim the patrimony. I love that you said that. Jacob, why is Christa right?
She is. No, she absolutely is. I mean, I think of this from the perspective of a composer, right? Because my primary concern is creating that music. I want to write a great deal of music for the liturgy, and obviously I write music. I shouldn't say obviously. You don't know what I do, but I write a great deal of music that's not.
That is what composers do generally.
Liturgy. I write for symphony orchestras. I write song cycles for tenor and piano and things like that, and string
commercial
quartets.
Jingles for radio, I imagine.
Not yet. Well, that would be great. I could fund everything else.
Christa's uncle owns a used car dealership in New Jersey that could use it.
There you go. But no, I think she's right on all accounts, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, of just saying you don't have to, like, how do I say this? I was told so many times in composition lessons, yeah, that's beautiful, but what's new about it? And there's this obsession with newness that actually prohibits you from being new, if you will. I mean, set aside the fact that, like you said, 99% of new things are just junk that aren't beautiful at all. And that people are trying so hard to be new and different that they just create vapid ugliness. And at the end of the day, what's shocking is to return to something that is traditionally beautiful. That's now you're the renegade if you do that. But set that aside, restriction, I think as Stravinsky said, something along the lines of restriction breeds creativity, something like that. You can't, he said, don't give me a blank page. I'm scared to death of it. He would create rules. And obviously, it's what the Mother Church does for us. Rules that give us freedom. And if you submit yourself to some sort of traditional understanding of music making, which has been perfected throughout the centuries, like I was saying before, polyphony or counterpoint or anything that have rules, those are frameworks in which you can be creative. And so I would challenge composers, and God willing, like I mentioned before briefly, I would love someday, whenever this happens, to start some sort of school that would teach people to do this. But if you are a young composer and you want to write new music for the church, submit yourselves to the rules that were used for centuries and see what you can do. Because I guarantee you, it won't be exactly the same as Palestrina. It won't be exactly the same as Lazarus or whatever. There's going to be, Ravel said this, Maurice Ravel, try to copy the masters, and the 10% that you fall short is you. That's what makes you unique. But you should start by always orienting yourself to what has been gone before you. Don't try to do something new. Don't try to break the mold. Submit yourself to the mold and be creative within it and see what happens.
Yeah, on that, in that line, on that note, Dominican Father Michael Sherwin loves to talk about jazz as the perfect analogy for the moral life, because, of course, the secret to jazz improvisation is that it's not random. It's operating good. Good improvisation is operating in a tightly choreographed structure. And he loves this analogy for the moral life, right? Because the moral life gives you all of the guidelines, right? The chord progressions, all of the base of the modes you're in, all these fundamentals that you need for jazz improvisation. You have fundamentals from the church and the moral life, and it's up to you, because you're uniquely you, to put it together in a fashion that's yours as you're living your life. And so I'm hearing you express the same idea, and I love that point you made from Stravinsky, a blank page. That's really interesting.
And he was.
I feel that way when I'm writing a talk. People are like, "Oh, we'd love to have you." And I'm like, "To talk about what? Oh, anything you want." It's like, okay, let me tell you about Indiana football, because now that's something worth talking about. But my whole life it wasn't until now. So, how would you like to hear about Coach Signetti and Mendoza? No, but it's true that there's really something to that, to having the fundamentals, and this is true of architecture. It's true of
what's really cool
classical drawing. So please, Chris.
Yeah, it was really cool. I think that Jacob was pointing out about counterpoint, and that knowing that early aspect of music history and development of music is that the music that really stands the test of time, that's still loved and looked at as very, very beautiful, even hundreds of years after, have these elements. They're going to stand the test of time. They're not going to just be gone the next year and not be listened to ever again. They're the stuff that Beethoven, Mozart have been writing, and you listen to it today, people are wowed by this. Even in our modernist culture, that is a little bit weird, And so just looking back in my own contemplation of these ideas through my life, it'll all sometimes you can consider it coming back to the purity of the overtone series that God created from the literal creation of the earth. If you think of that, some of the sounds and the tones that go together in the most beautiful way, that even when you sing a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth, the fifth is the basis of their overtone series. This creates the beauty in a singular note in the sound that we hear that's created in the world. And then if you look at the history and the rules for counterpoint, for those notes going together in good harmonies together, that comes, some of the most beautiful sounds that people don't know how to describe unless you study it, comes from this overtone series that God created. It like blows my mind even thinking about this, that the things sometimes that people can't define or put the definition for why they find this beautiful comes from how God created sound itself and our ears to perceive sound. It's like really, that's too long of a lecture to go into right now, but it just is very interesting to me.
Well, but that's why Wagner's evil. Just resolve it. Stop expanding it.
Yes.
But there's really something to that. My dad has an album from like the 1976 North Texas State Jazz Lab, right, where they were doing all kinds of wild stuff, probably a lot of drugs too. But there's a song called "Ode to the Royal Mongolian Sumo Foosball Festival," which features two dueling tenor saxophone solos, and this song like goes on forever. And the solos are half step apart.
Oh.
And
yikes.
It's pretty wild. But of course, it's a great example of why it isn't at rest, why it doesn't give you pleasure the way that all these other things does, because of course in total violation of this entire tradition, and yet somehow this is viewed as intrepid when really it's just bad. Just not even.
Yeah, people wonder, why does certain music make you cringe and like viscerally, like, ooh, like that sound? It's because of what you're talking about, those intervals that are not the most beautiful sound. It's crazy.
Not natural, right?
Yes.
And I mean, the beautiful thing is in all of these things, and we're both, Christa and I, we're skating around getting into like the real deep music theory here. But if you create a sound, a dissonance, an interval that doesn't naturally harmonize, those are permissible in all of these rules, but they require resolution, right? So if you have a half step, which, again, for people listening to this who have no idea what we're talking about, it's two notes right next to each other on the piano that don't go together at all.
It's when you have two fourth graders playing recorders and they don't sound in tune. That's what it is. It's that noise.
That's exactly it.
But they can be used for beautiful purposes if they're used in an ordered way. So it's not that the church only writes, originally, yes, it was just parallel fifths the whole time, organum, chant, and that's beautiful and that's pure and that's wonderful. But if you have dissonance, use it for an expressive purpose. And it even in itself is a mirror of sort of what should I? It's itself is a microcosm of conversion. It's the conversion of your heart, right? It's something unnatural that resolves, that repents into nature, into something beautiful. And now we're really getting into the nitty gritty, but that makes people cry.
I like that. I think that resolution as conversion. That's great.
Yeah.
Not to get too ethereal, but I think that another analogy to this idea is that when you have some of the most beautiful and moving organ improvisation during Mass that I've heard, you can train, to create tension with the dissonance. And that can be an analogy to sin when we feel, something is wrong with me. I'm not feeling totally free if you're impeded by sin. And then that resolution of the dissonance is like, oh my gosh, I have a weight lifted off of my mind and off of my ears. And then the resolution is what gives us that feeling of peace and the warmth. And that can be equated to like going to confession and having your soul wiped and having a clean slate from sin too. I think it's really profound to think of it that way.
Or alternatively, yearning. Oftentimes we hear these things that you can, and this again is something that can be shown. If I do have a piano, but it's not going to work. But sometimes you can hear, if you play a half step off from, Christa mentioned the overtone series, this naturally occurring phenomenon. If you play one note off and you just pull it up, you don't even actually need to play the right note. It is almost as if, I've heard this done many times, it's almost as if the pitch itself corrects to the note that's right next to it. And that's the note you were supposed to be on.
Leading tones.
It's naturally there. And so it yearns for harmony. It yearns for union with God, if you will. So I can also see it as sort of our soul's longing for heaven. I was told once by a Catholic composer that he believes the reason that we have tonality in music, which is another way of saying a home key, if we're in C major, we're coming back to C. We're going to start in C and we're going to end in C. But the whole reason that developed is because it mirrors the soul's journey on earth to heaven. You need to know what your home is at the beginning of your life. Then you wander, you go through a bunch of different keys and development and whatever. But at the end, the journey brings you back home. And if you don't know where home is, you're never going to get there. And God forbid you spend your whole time wandering and never wind up at home. But all these things are very, very much connected to the spiritual life.
Yes, so good.
I don't think we're going to do better than that. That's a phenomenal ending. Although I do think, maybe we should start up a new series, a kind of branch of Godsplaining on music, spiritual theology and music theory.
Yes. Love it.
We'll get your piano hooked up for that, Jacob.
Yes.
We do more.
So cool.
This has been really wonderful chatting with you all. Midway through, we were sort of talking a little bit about Hopes for a Higher Word and some of your upcoming events. We'll link to all of that in the show notes, and make sure people are connected with A Higher Word and they're especially New York-based events. But Christa and Jacob, where can people follow you respectively?
Oh, thanks. My Instagram is where I post most about upcoming performance things and things like that. I think it's Christa Dalmazio _musicista, which is musician in Italian. And then I have a website as well. Maybe we can link it. I can send you a link to that as well.
Yeah, I have a website as well. That's beranekmusic.com. Just my last name, Beranek, music. But it's actually my wife and I both. So it's it's
nice.
Our joint website.
So it's mostly her. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, no, it was me to begin with, and she took the name, and I said, well, that's serendipitous. We can just have you don't need to pay for two separate websites. So
cool.
We'll make sure we get links to all this in the show notes. Well, thank you so much again, both of you, for taking the time today. I hope listeners that you enjoyed this episode. We obviously enjoyed chatting, so we went we went well beyond what I promised Jacob and Christa. So again, I'm very, very grateful for your time. Friends, if you enjoy this episode or think that it would help someone along the way, please share it. Leave us a comment, leave a question. Take on Christa. Tell her she's wrong. We want to hear from you.
Yes, bring it on.
Otherwise, leave us a rating. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps people to find the podcast. Head on over to godsplaining.org, where you can find information on upcoming Godsplaining events. You can follow us at Godsplaining across any number of social media platforms. But most importantly, please know that we are praying for you. We ask that you would pray for us. God bless.